I am the sole resident and owner of Kavik River Camp. In order to run a business, I have to cater to the people in the season that they're roaming around. I need to make enough revenue to support the camp and get ready for the next year.
Two names are missing from the cast of Life Below Zero, and almost nobody outside Alaska noticed when they disappeared. That silence is the strangest part of this story. A show built on survival, on grit, on people who wrestled the cold and won season after season, quietly lost two of its own, and the internet barely blinked. Instead, the rumors that spread were about the wrong people entirely, while the real losses sat mostly unspoken, tucked into local obituaries and comment sections thousands of miles from where most viewers were watching. For over a decade, National Geographic's Life Below Zero, produced by BBC Studios, pulled audiences into a version of Alaska that television rarely shows honestly. No competition, no prize money, no scripted conflict manufactured for ratings. Just people like Sue Aikens, Chip and Agnes Hailstone, Andy Bassick, and Jesse Holmes doing what they had always done, filmed as it happened. When the show premiered in May 2013, it promised something rare, and it delivered on that promise for 12 years and more than 300 episodes, before Disney, which owns National Geographic, declined to renew the production contract in late 2024, bringing the flagship series to a close. Because the show ran so long and touched so many lives, viewers grew attached in a way that outlasted the broadcast schedule. They followed these people the way you follow family, checking in between seasons, watching for updates on social media, worrying when someone went quiet for too long. That kind of attachment is exactly the soil rumors grow in. And starting around 2023, rumors about deaths within the Life Below Zero world began circulating aggressively, mixing real tragedy with pure fabrication until the two became almost impossible to tell apart. Let's start with what is actually true, because the truth here is sadder and more grounded than any hoax could be. The losses did not come from the flagship series. They came from its sister show, Life Below Zero, Port Protection, which follows a small roadless fishing community on Prince of Wales Island in southeast Alaska. Both shows share a production team and a documentary style, but Port Protection has always leaned closer to the edge, following an aging population with fewer resources and even less margin for error. Gary Muleberger was the first of those losses, and for many longtime fans, he was the heart of the spin-off. Born on December 15, 1945, Gary had lived in Port Protection for close to 4 decades by the time cameras found him, and his knowledge of the land showed in every scene he was in. He fixed boat engines with parts that had no business still working. He trapped, fished, and moved through the wilderness with an ease that made the hardest tasks look almost effortless. He was rarely seen without his dog Trapper at his side, and neighbors described him less as a television personality and more as a fixture of the community, the kind of person a small town quietly depends on. On March 17, 2021, a fire tore through Gary's home on Prince of Wales Island. Alaska State Troopers received the report that morning, and by the time crews reached the remote property, the house was already engulfed. Gary had not been seen since before the blaze started, and in the days that followed, investigators combed through the wreckage. Journalist Zaz Hollander, reporting for the Anchorage Daily News, tracked the story as it unfolded, from the initial report of a missing man to the confirmation that followed. On March 25, 2021, the Alaska State Medical Examiner positively identified human remains found in the debris as Gary Muleberger. He was 75 years old. The fire was later ruled accidental by the deputy fire marshal, with some reports pointing to a propane hot water tank as a likely cause. Trapper, remarkably, survived and was taken in by neighbors, a small mercy in an otherwise devastating story. The Life Below Zero production team posted a tribute on Facebook that read, in part, that Gary had an incredibly big heart and epitomized so much of the human spirit, welcoming the world into his life with open arms. Andy Denart, a television critic and journalist whose work has appeared in outlets including NPR and The Atlantic, covered the aftermath for his site Reality Blurred, noting the outpouring from a fanbase that had come to see Gary as far more than a cast member. Community members quoted in local coverage echoed that sentiment. One resident called him one of the last of the old breed. Another urged people to honor him by passing down the knowledge he had spent a lifetime gathering. For a man who never sought the spotlight, that response said everything about the space he actually occupied in people's lives. Just months later, Port Protection lost a second cast member, and her story carried a different kind of weight. Litzy Bautello was born on November 22, 1958, in Norwalk, California, and her path to Alaska ran through a career most viewers never would have guessed. She spent more than 2 decades as a trained polymer clay sculptor, creating detailed aquatic-themed artwork before trading that life for the isolation of port protection. On screen, she brought something the show rarely got credit for, a quiet gentleness paired with real toughness, a combination that made her scenes feel different from the rest of the cast without ever feeling out of place. Litzy's life before the cameras arrived had already asked more of her than most people are ever asked to give. She lost both of her sons before her own death. Her son Johnny Bautello died in a car accident in 2015 near Klawock, Alaska, at 18 years old. Her other son, Leland Dean, also predeceased her. Despite those losses, she stayed in port protection, continuing to create, continuing to contribute to a community that depended on people like her for more than entertainment. Her niece, Veronica Arendts, later described her as someone who was never afraid of much, someone whose strength was visible even to a child watching her from a distance. In the winter before her death, Litzy began fighting ovarian cancer. According to her husband, John Dean, she passed away in her own bed in port protection on June 25, 2021, with a view she loved in front of her. She was 62. Her death did not arrive with the same jolt of shock that Gary's had, since illness gives people time to prepare in a way fire never does, but the grief it left behind ran just as deep. Fans who had watched her work with her hands, who had seen her navigate the same brutal winters as everyone else on the show, filled comment sections with memories of her humor and her resilience. She was not the loudest presence on port protection, but she never needed to be. Her strength spoke for itself. Those 2 deaths, Gary's and Litzy's, are the confirmed losses connected to the Life Below Zero universe. Everything else circulating online is either outdated, misremembered, or simply invented, and the gap between those 2 categories matters more than it might seem. Sue Aikens, the woman most associated with the original series and its most recognizable face, has been the target of death hoaxes for years. Rumors claiming she had died began surfacing as early as 2023 and resurfaced again afterward, spreading through forums and short-form video platforms with captions designed to look like breaking news. None of it was true. Sue has continued to run Kavik River Camp, share updates with her audience, and speak openly about the physical toll decades in the Arctic have taken on her body, including lingering effects from a documented 2007 grizzly bear attack that nearly killed her. She has talked candidly about surgeries, about grief following the loss of her mother, and about the ongoing work of managing a remote camp largely on her own. She is, by every verifiable account, very much alive. Denise Becker, partner to longtime cast member Andy Bassick, faced a similar wave of unfounded rumors in early 2024 after stepping back from filming for personal and health reasons. Her absence from the show was misread by some corners of the internet as something far darker than the truth, which was simply a woman choosing privacy during a difficult stretch. Andy himself survived a serious health scare in 2018, when a hip injury sustained while freeing a stuck snow machine became infected and spread into the bone, requiring an airlift to Florida for treatment. He recovered, returned to Alaska, and rebuilt his homestead, largely on crutches. Jesse Holmes, meanwhile, has done the opposite of fading away. After a serious accident in 2022 that broke ribs and a wrist and caused internal injuries, he rebuilt his strength through his bond with his sled dogs and went on to win the Iditarod Trail Sled Dog Race in both 2025 and 2026, a level of comeback that stands in stark contrast to the rumors that once tried to write him off entirely. So why do these hoaxes keep surfacing around a show like this one? Part of the answer is simple proximity to real danger. Viewers have watched this cast face frozen rivers, aggressive wildlife, equipment failures and brutal storms, and injuries that would end most people's ambitions entirely. When the setting itself is genuinely life-threatening, a false rumor about death does not sound absurd. It sounds plausible, even likely, which is exactly what makes it so easy to spread and so hard to kill once it starts. What gets lost in that cycle of speculation is the actual toll this lifestyle has taken, quietly and without spectacle, on 2 people who deserve to be remembered accurately rather than mistaken for someone else. Gary Muleberger did not die because Alaska demanded a dramatic ending. He died in an accidental house fire, a tragedy that could happen anywhere, to anyone, regardless of how skilled they were at surviving the cold. Litzy Bautello did not lose a battle to the wilderness. She lost one to cancer, the same disease that takes people everywhere, in cities and villages alike, survivalist or not. That distinction matters. It separates the myth of Alaska as some untamable force that claims its own from a far more human reality that people who choose to live remotely still face the same illnesses, The same accidents, the same fragile machinery of aging bodies and faulty wiring that touches everyone else. The wilderness didn't need to be dramatic to take Gary and Litzy from the people who loved them. It just needed ordinary bad luck, the kind that has nothing to do with courage or preparation. What remains, more than anything, is the legacy both of them left behind in a community that continues on without them. Port protection still stands. The people who knew Gary still fish the same waters he once knew by heart, still tell stories about the boat he kept running long after anyone else would have given up on it. The people who knew Litzy still hold pieces of art she shaped with her own hands, still remember the strength she carried through losses no parent should have to survive, and still point to the emergency phone lines she once helped install as proof of how much she gave to a place that was never required to give anything back to her. Life Below Zero itself may have ended its run in February 2025, but the honesty it captured, about isolation, about resilience, about lives lived without shortcuts, outlasts the broadcast schedule that once carried it into millions of living rooms. Gary and Litzy were never characters written to serve a season arc, and they never needed to be. They were neighbors, mentors, artists, and survivors long before a camera crew ever found their corner of Alaska, and they remained exactly that after the crews left for the last time. Their absence is felt by the people who actually knew them, in ways no headline or hoax could ever capture, long after the cameras stopped rolling and the rest of us moved on to the next rumor, the next headline, the next name wrongly added to a list it never belonged on.